Hello class, today we're going to look at a system of equations with fractions involved. I've noticed a few posts in the discussion forum where you're struggling with some fractions. So let's go ahead and look at this one. We're going to use elimination, which means we want the same number in front, opposite sign. So if we look at our problem that we're starting with right now, we already have the same number. We have a positive 1/2 x in front of both of them. So all I need to do is get one of these to be negative. So I'm going to multiply by a -1. So my first equation is going to stay the same. But in my second equation, when I distribute a -1 through, that's going to change the sign of everything. So I'm going to get a -1/2 x minus 2y equals -4/3. Okay, so this is the part where I think we're running into some issues, is we're going to go ahead and add these, which the 1/2 and the -1/2 are going to cancel out. Now when I go ahead and add these, I think we're getting a little confused on remembering how to find common denominators, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it out here as 1/3 y minus 2y equals, add these two, 49/18 plus a negative, so that's really a -4/3. So now I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of finding common denominators and actually working through them. So I'm going to make my 2 2/1. So I'm working with 3 and 1 to find the common denominator. So my common denominator would be 3, which means I'm going to multiply this one by 3. So that gives me 1/3 y minus 6/3y equals. Now I find a common denominator for my fractions on the right side. We have a 3 and we have an 18, so my common denominator is 18, so I'm going to multiply by 6 here. And that gives me 49/18 minus 24/18. Okay, so I'm taking my time, breaking it apart, writing out all the common denominators before I start combining any like terms. We're now ready to combine like terms. So we have 1/3 minus 6/3. So 1 minus 6 gives me -5. I keep the denominator. 49 minus 24 gives me 25, and I keep the denominator. Okay, so we're almost solved for y. What we have is we have a fraction times a variable. So when we have multiplication, we like to use division, dividing by a -5/3. But dividing by a fraction isn't very friendly for us. So if you remember, when we divide by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So basically, we're just going to multiply by -3/5. So I'm multiplying by the reciprocal because that's the same as dividing by the fraction. We'll go ahead and reduce. Everything on the left side is going to reduce. That's why we picked that to multiply by. And that gives me y equals, well, 5 goes into 25 5 times, so I can reduce that. 18 and 3 reduced to a 1 and a 6. Make sure you don't lose your negative sign. So I have 5 times -1 divided by 6 times 1. So we end up with -5/6. This is our y value. Remember that when you're working with solving a system of equations where there's two variables, we're trying to find the x and y. So we've really only found half the answer. Usually the second half is a little easier. To find the second answer, I'm going to take this value for y and plug it in and solve for x. It doesn't matter which equation you pick. I'm going to pick the bottom one just because we're multiplying by 2 here instead of 1/3. So let's go ahead and solve for x now. Okay, so we have the equation 1/2 x plus 2 times my y value. Well, the y value we just found is right here. It's -5/6. And it equals 4/3 still. So we go ahead and multiply. We get 1/2 x equals 2 times -5. Remember, this is 2 over 1. Sorry, that should be a plus there. So 2 times -5 is a -10 over 6 equals 4/3. And then we go ahead and add 10 over 6 to both sides. I'm going to write it right next to it because we're adding and subtracting fractions. So we're going to need to find that common denominator. So these are going to reduce out, and I'm left with 1/2 x equals. Now we need to find common denominators between 3 and 6. It's 6, so I'm going to multiply by 2, and that gives me 8 over 6 plus 10 over 6. We can now add those fractions, and that gives me 18 over 6. And I get 1/2 x equals, this reduces to 3. 18 divided by 6. And then we can multiply by the reciprocal. 2 over 1. Multiply by 2 over 1. And we get x equals 6. So in Math Excel, usually what it shows is it has the little brackets, and then it has your blank box for your answer. You've probably figured this out by now. When we're working with a solution to a system, it's an ordered pair, so we use parentheses. Our x value goes first, then our y value, and we close parentheses. So the hard part about these ones is probably working through all the fractions and finding common denominators to work with. But I think if you take your time and actually write out the problem, you'll be okay. As I was working through this, what I noticed is I probably could have reduced this fraction of 10 over 6 to 5/3, and that would have added a little easier with my 4/3. But both ways will work as long as you eventually remember to reduce. All right, hopefully this was helpful in solving a system where you have some fractions involved.